Introduction. Blood Brothers, a play by Willie Russell, is a tragic tale of class divide, fate, and family, set in Liverpool from the 1960s to the early 1980s. The story follows the lives of twin brothers, Mickey and Edward, who are separated at birth and raised in drastically different social environments. The play explores how their contrasting upbringings lead to their eventual downfall, despite their innate bond. This analysis will break down the key events, characters and themes essential for excelling in GCSE English literature. Act 1. The Separation. The play begins with a narrator's ominous words. So did you hear the story of the Johnstone twins, as like each other as two new pins? The prologue foreshadows the tragic ending, establishing a tone of inevitability and fate. We are introduced to Mrs. Johnstone, a struggling working-class mother of 7, who discovers she is expecting twins. Her financial desperation is captured in her lament, with 7 hungry mouths to feed and 1 more nearly due, highlighting the pressures of poverty. Enter Mrs. Lyons, a wealthy but lonely woman who employs Mrs. Johnstone as a cleaner. Mrs. Lyons, unable to have children of her own, manipulates Mrs. Johnstone into giving up one of her babies, playing on her fears of not being able to provide for both. The decision is fraught with moral ambiguity, encapsulated in Mrs. Johnstone's reluctant agreement: if my child was raised in a palace like this one, he wouldn't have to worry where his next meal was coming from. The twins are separated at birth. Mickey remains with Mrs. Johnstone, while Edward is given to Mrs. Lyons and raised in a life of privilege. Mrs. Lyons, paranoid about the secret being revealed, tells Mrs. Johnstone that if the twins ever learn they are brothers, they will both die. This superstition becomes a recurring motif throughout the play, reinforcing the theme of fate. Act 2. The Reunion and Friendship. As the play progresses, we see the stark contrast in the boys' lives. Mickey, growing up in a deprived, working-class environment, becomes hardened by his circumstances. In contrast, Edward, or Eddie, enjoys the luxuries of middle-class life, including a private education and abundant opportunities. Despite their different upbringings, fate intervenes when Mickey and Edward meet by chance at the age of 7, instantly becoming best friends, or blood brothers, unaware of their true relationship. The innocence of their friendship is poignantly expressed in their exchange. "Do you want to be my blood brother, Eddie?" And Eddie's eager response, "Yes, please." This moment symbolizes their bond, which transcends social class, yet is tainted by the secret of their true identities. Mickey's older brother, Sammy, introduces him to a life of petty crime, while Edward is shielded by his privileged upbringing. The differences in their lives are starkly contrasted when Mickey envies Edward's lifestyle, expressing frustration with the limitations imposed by his social class. Mrs. Lyons, increasingly paranoid, manipulates her husband into moving the family to the countryside to separate the boys. However, fate intervenes once more when Mrs. Johnstone and her family are rehoused in the same area. Act 3. Love, Conflict and Tragedy. As teenagers, the differences between Mickey and Edward become more pronounced. Mickey's life takes a downward spiral. He leaves school, marries his childhood sweetheart Linda, and struggles to find work, eventually being laid off. In contrast, Edward goes on to university, symbolizing the opportunities afforded by wealth and class. Despite this, their friendship endures, though tensions begin to rise, particularly over their mutual affection for Linda. Linda, who has always been close to both boys, marries Mickey, but it is clear that Edward also harbors feelings for her. Mickey's increasing frustration and feelings of inadequacy are compounded when he is drawn into criminal activity by Sammy. Mickey is eventually arrested and imprisoned, a turning point that deepens his despair and dependency on antidepressants upon his release. Meanwhile, Edward's life continues on an upward trajectory, now as a successful local councillor. The play's climax occurs when Mickey, in a state of mental and emotional collapse, learns of Linda and Edward's relationship. Consumed by jealousy and rage and fueled by a sense of betrayal, Mickey confronts Edward with a gun in the council chambers. At this moment, Mrs. Johnstone, in a desperate attempt to stop the tragedy, reveals that they are brothers. The revelation comes too late. Mickey, in shock, accidentally fires the gun, killing Edward. The police shoot Mickey dead in the chaos that follows. The narrator closes the play with a chilling reminder of the play's central theme. And do we blame superstition for what came to pass? Or could it be what we, the English, have come to know as class? Key characters and relationships. Mickey Johnstone. Mickey is one of the play's central characters, representing the struggles of the working class. He is portrayed as a warm-hearted, albeit troubled young man, whose life is shaped by the harsh realities of poverty. His relationship with Edward is central to the play, as it highlights the contrasts between their lives and the tragic consequences of their separation. Mickey's relationship with Linda, whom he marries, becomes strained as he falls into a life of crime and despair, driven by the pressures of his social environment. Edward Lyons, Eddie. Edward is Mickey's twin brother. Raised in a wealthy household by Mrs. Lyons, he represents the privileges of the middle class, enjoying opportunities that Mickey can only dream of. Despite his privileged background, Edward is kind-hearted and forms a genuine bond with Mickey. His friendship with Mickey is a source of joy, but it also becomes a source of tension, especially as they grow older and their feelings for Linda create a rift between them. Edward's unawareness of his true parentage makes him a tragic figure, caught in a web of circumstances beyond his control. Mrs. Johnstone. Mrs. Johnstone is the tragic heroine of the play, a working-class mother who is forced to give up one of her twins to ensure a better life for him. Her decision, made out of desperation, haunts her throughout the play. She is a symbol of maternal love and sacrifice, but also of the harsh realities faced by the working class. Her relationship with her children, especially Mickey, is central to the play's emotional impact. Her revelation of the boys' true identities at the climax is a desperate attempt to prevent tragedy, but it only hastens the inevitable. Mrs. Lyons. Mrs. Lyons is a key antagonist in the play, representing the upper class's coldness and paranoia. Her manipulation of Mrs. Johnstone and her obsessive need to keep Edward's true identity a secret drive much of the play's conflict. Her relationship with Edward is one of possessiveness, rather than genuine maternal love, and her increasing paranoia contributes to the play's tragic outcome. Mrs. Lyons' actions illustrate the destructive power of class divisions and the lengths to which people will go to maintain their social status. Linda. Linda is the love interest of both Mickey and Edward, and her relationships with the two brothers are central to the play's dramatic tension. She represents the innocent victim caught between the two worlds of the Johnstone twins. Her marriage to Mickey and later emotional connection with Edward highlight the complexities of love, loyalty, and betrayal. Linda's character underscores the impact of social circumstances on personal relationships, as her life is shaped by the same forces of class and fate that govern the lives of Mickey and Edward. Sammy Johnstone. Sammy, Mickey's older brother, is a delinquent who embodies the cycle of poverty and crime that traps many of the play's working-class characters. His influence on Mickey, leading him into a life of crime, plays a crucial role in Mickey's downfall. Sammy's character highlights the lack of opportunities available to the working class and the way in which desperation can lead to destructive choices. The narrator. The narrator serves as a constant reminder of the play's themes of fate, class, and superstition. His presence throughout the play creates a sense of inevitability, as he comments on the actions of the characters and foreshadows the tragic events to come. The narrator's role is to guide the audience's understanding of the play's moral and social messages, making him a crucial figure in the overall impact of the story. Themes: class and social inequality. The central theme of Blood Brothers is the impact of class on individuals' lives. The stark contrast between Mickey and Edward's upbringings highlights the deep divisions in society and the way in which these divisions determine one's opportunities, relationships, and ultimately, one's fate. The play is a powerful critique of the class system, showing how it perpetuates inequality and suffering. Fate and superstition. From the very beginning, the play is infused with a sense of fate, underscored by the superstition that if the twins ever learn of their true relationship, they will die. The characters' actions, particularly those of Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons, are driven by a belief in fate and the inevitability of certain outcomes. The play raises questions about whether the tragedy was truly fated, or whether it was the result of the characters' actions and the social forces at play. Nature versus nurture. The play explores the theme of nature versus nurture through the contrasting lives of Mickey and Edward. Despite being biologically identical, their vastly different upbringings lead to very different outcomes. This theme is central to the play's examination of social class, as it suggests that environment and upbringing have a profound impact on one's life chances and personality. Friendship and betrayal. The friendship between Mickey and Edward is one of the play's most poignant elements, but it is ultimately doomed by the secrets and lies that surround them. The betrayal that Mickey feels when he discovers Linda and Edward's relationship, and when he learns of their true identities, is a key factor in the tragic climax. The play examines how friendship can be both a source of strength and a potential cause of conflict when combined with issues of class and identity. Guilt and responsibility. The characters in Blood Brothers are haunted by guilt and a sense of responsibility for the tragedy that unfolds. Mrs. Johnston's guilt over giving up Edward, Mrs. Lyons' guilt over her manipulation, and Mickey's guilt over his actions all contribute to the play's emotional depth. The theme of responsibility is closely linked to the play's social critique, as it questions who is to blame for the character's suffering the individuals themselves, or the society in which they live. Conclusion. Blood Brothers is a powerful exploration of class, fate, and the ties that bind us. Willie Russell's play is both a personal tragedy and a social critique, showing how the forces of class and fate can shape and ultimately destroy lives. Through its rich characters, poignant themes, and memorable quotes, Blood Brothers remains a compelling and essential text for GCSE English literature, offering a deep and complex exploration of the human condition.